He was secretly in love with her for years, but stayed silent, until she finally did something that changed everything. Rain slammed violently against the apartment windows hard enough to sound like stones. Seo-jun barely heard it. He stood frozen in the middle of his kitchen, staring at the message glowing on his phone, while his heartbeat turned uneven inside his chest. She left with him. 3 words. That was all Minji had sent. But it was enough to make panic rise through his entire body. Seo-jun grabbed his coat immediately. His chair scraped harshly against the floor as he rushed toward the door without even turning the kitchen light off behind him. His mind was already racing ahead of him, replaying every conversation he'd had with her during the past 3 weeks. Every smile, every silence, every moment he almost confessed but didn't. Outside, Seoul was drowning in rain. Cars sprayed water across flooded roads. Neon signs reflected across the wet pavement in blurred colors. Cold wind pushed against him as he crossed the street without waiting for the signal to change. He didn't care. All he could think about was her. Amara. The possibility of losing her hit him harder tonight than it ever had before. And for the first time in 2 years, Seo-jun realized silence was no longer protecting him. It was destroying him. Before we continue, if you love emotional Afro Korea stories filled with jealousy, secret love, heartbreak, and unforgettable confessions, make sure you subscribe right now, like this video, and turn on post notifications so you never miss another story on this channel. And tell us in the comments, which city and country are you watching from today? Seo-jun reached her apartment building breathless. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto the corridor floor as he stopped outside apartment 5C. For a second, his hand hovered near the door. Then he knocked. Once, twice. The door opened slowly. Amara stared at him in shock.
Seo-jun?
Her voice sounded weak, like she had been crying. His chest tightened instantly. She stood there wearing an oversized gray sweater, her curls loosely tied back, her eyes swollen and red. The sight of her looking broken almost shattered the last bit of control he had left. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. That was all. She looked at him for a long moment before stepping aside silently. He entered. The apartment smelled faintly of tea and rain. A movie still played soundlessly on the television, forgotten halfway through. Her phone lay face up on the couch beside an unopened box of tissues. Seo-jun didn't ask questions. He didn't ask whether she was okay because clearly she wasn't. Instead, he sat beside her quietly, close enough for their shoulders to touch. And finally, she broke. "I feel so stupid," Amara whispered before tears filled her eyes again. Seo-jun immediately looked at her. "Don't say that." He ended 2 years with one message. Her voice cracked painfully. 2 years, Seo-jun. Anger flashed through him immediately. Not toward her. Toward the man who had hurt her. Toward the fact that somebody could hold her heart and still treat it carelessly. "He doesn't deserve you," Seo-jun said softly. Amara laughed bitterly through tears. "That sounds nice, but it doesn't make this hurt less." He knew. That was the problem. He knew exactly how heartbreak felt because he had been living inside one silently for years. Just beside her. She leaned forward, covering her face emotionally. "I keep thinking maybe I wasn't enough." Seo-jun's expression changed instantly. "Don't ever say that." "But..."
No.
His voice came out firmer than expected. Amara slowly looked at him. "You gave him everything," Seo-jun continued quietly. "Anybody with eyes could see that." Her breathing trembled. "You loved him honestly." A painful silence settled between them. Then she whispered the question he hated most. "Then why wasn't that enough for him?" Seo-jun looked away briefly because the truth sitting inside his chest almost escaped him. Because some men are too blind to recognize the person standing in front of them. Because if it were him, he would never let her question her worth like this. Because he loved her so much it physically hurt sometimes. But he couldn't say any of those things. Not yet. So instead, he reached for the blanket resting beside him and gently placed it over her legs. Small actions. That was how he loved her. Quietly, consistently, painfully. Amara watched him carefully. For 2 years, Kim Seo-jun had existed in her life like gravity. Constant, dependable, impossible to ignore once noticed properly. He remembered things nobody else remembered. The way she hated sleeping during thunderstorms. The exact tea she drank when stressed. How she always skipped meals while working. How silence usually meant something was wrong, even when she insisted she was fine. He noticed everything. Sometimes too much. And that was exactly what confused her. Because a man who cared this deeply should have confessed already. Shouldn't he? You didn't have to come here tonight, she said quietly. Yes, I did. The answer came too fast. Too honest. They both felt it immediately. Seo-jun looked away first. Amara stared at him carefully, emotions shifting behind her eyes. Why? She asked softly. His heartbeat stumbled. Because I love you. The words rose instantly inside him. But fear rose too. Fear had controlled him for years now. Fear of ruining the friendship. Fear of hearing rejection. Fear of losing the one person who mattered most to him. So instead, he swallowed the confession again. You shouldn't be alone right now, he answered quietly. Amara looked down slowly. Disappointment flickered across her face so briefly most people wouldn't notice.
Seo-jun noticed.
Of course he did. That was the worst part. He noticed every emotion she tried hiding. And still said nothing. Hours passed quietly. Rain continued tapping against the windows while Seoul slept outside. At some point, Amara fell asleep beside him on the couch, emotionally exhausted. Seo-jun looked down at her carefully. Even asleep, she looked sad. His chest tightened painfully. Slowly, carefully, he adjusted the blanket around her shoulders so she wouldn't get cold. Then he stayed there, watching her, loving her silently. Again, around 4 a.m., his phone vibrated. It was Ji-hoon. Did you go to her place? Seo-jun sighed quietly before replying. Yes. And? Seo-jun looked at Amara sleeping beside him. Nothing. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then, you're going to lose her. Seo-jun stared at the message for a long time. Because deep down, he knew Ji-hoon was right. The next morning, sunlight crept softly through the curtains. Amara woke slowly before realizing she had fallen asleep beside him. Seo-jun was still there, sitting quietly near the edge of the couch, half awake. His glasses slightly crooked like he hadn't slept properly all night. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. You stayed. He looked at her calmly. Of course. That answer affected her more than it should have. Most people leave eventually, but Seo-jun never really did. That consistency scared her sometimes because it made her wonder questions she tried not to ask herself too often. Questions like, why does he care this much? Why does he look at me like that sometimes? Why does it feel like there are words trapped behind every silence between us? She sat up slowly. You should go home and rest.
I'm okay.
You've been awake all night. So have you. A small silence passed between them. Then unexpectedly, Amara smiled faintly for the first time since the breakup. You always do this.
Seo-jun blinked slightly.
Do what? Show up exactly when I need you. His chest tightened again. Because she had no idea how much he would always show up for her if given the chance. No matter what it cost him. Before he could answer, her phone suddenly vibrated loudly on the table. Both of them looked down. A new message appeared on the screen. Unknown number. You deserve better than the way he treated you. Let me take you out tonight. Seo-jun's expression changed immediately. Amara noticed. And for the first time, something inside her became curious. Very curious. Because that reaction did not look like friendship at all. Seo-jun tried to keep his expression neutral. He failed. It happened for less than 2 seconds, but Amara saw it clearly. The tension in his jaw, the way his eyes darkened slightly before he looked away. Jealousy. Real jealousy. Not polite concern. Not protective friendship. Jealousy. Interesting. Amara picked up her phone slowly, pretending to read the message again, while secretly watching him from the corner of her eye. You're not going to ask who sent it? She asked casually. Seo-jun leaned back against the couch. That's your business. The answer sounded controlled. Too controlled. She almost smiled. For 2 years, this man had hidden every emotion behind calmness so carefully that most people probably believed he barely felt anything deeply at all. But Amara had started noticing the cracks. Tiny ones. The way he became quieter whenever another man's name entered conversation. The way he always avoided eye contact whenever discussions became emotional. The way his voice changed slightly whenever she mentioned relationships. He was careful, but not invisible. "It's probably someone from work," she said lightly.
Seo-jun nodded once.
"Maybe." Silence settled again. The sunlight coming through the curtains softened the apartment, warming the cold atmosphere left behind by heartbreak and sleeplessness. Normally, mornings with Seo-jun felt comforting. Easy.
Familiar.
Today felt different. Charged somehow. Amara stood slowly from the couch. "I'm making coffee. I'll help. You stayed awake all night." I said I'm okay. She shook her head softly while walking toward the kitchen. "You're stubborn. And you forget to eat when you're stressed. That's different." "It's really not." Despite everything, she laughed quietly. Seo-jun watched her carefully from the couch, and something painful moved through his chest again at the sound of her laughter. Even after crying all night, she still somehow carried warmth with her naturally. That was the problem. Everything about her stayed with him. The way she laughed, the way she frowned while reading, the way she tucked loose curls behind her ear while thinking. He remembered all of it without trying. And it was becoming exhausting pretending those feelings meant nothing. Inside the kitchen, Amara prepared coffee while trying to ignore the strange tension growing inside her own chest. Last night had changed something. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. Seeing Seo-jun appear at her door soaked in rain after hearing about her breakup had affected her more deeply than she wanted to admit. Because people don't run through storms for someone they only see as a friend. And the worst part? A part of her had wanted him to finally say it. Wanted him to stop hiding behind quiet gestures and careful words. Wanted him to just look at her and admit the truth both of them were dancing around. But he didn't. Again, she placed 2 cups on the counter. "Sugar. You already know the answer, right?"
No sugar. No happiness. Seo-jun smiled faintly.
"You say that every time. And one day you'll finally accept I'm right." She handed him the coffee carefully. Their fingers brushed briefly. Both of them noticed. Neither mentioned it. Amara took a slow sip before leaning against the kitchen counter. "So,"
Seo-jun looked at her.
"So, what happens now?" He frowned slightly. "With what?" "With me." The question caught him off guard. Amara looked down into her cup quietly. "I spent 2 years building my life around someone," she admitted softly. "And now suddenly he's gone."
Seo-jun's chest tightened.
"You'll be okay. You sound very sure." "I am." "Why?" "Because I know your strength better than anybody else. Because I've watched you survive loneliness, pressure, homesickness, exhaustion, disappointment. Because you're stronger than you realize." But once again, he couldn't say those things honestly without revealing too much. So instead, he answered carefully. "Because you don't let difficult things destroy you." Amara looked at him for several seconds. "You really pay attention to me." The sentence landed between them quietly. Seo-jun felt his heartbeat stumble again. Too dangerous. This conversation was becoming too dangerous. He placed his coffee down slowly. "You should rest today." "There you go again." "What?" Changing the subject. He looked away briefly. Amara watched him carefully. Then finally, softly, she asked the question that had lived inside her for months now. "Seo-jun, have you ever liked someone and stayed silent about it?" The air changed instantly. Completely.
Seo-jun froze.
Amara's heartbeat sped up while waiting for his answer. This was it. A doorway. Maybe finally. "Yes." Her chest tightened immediately. "Yes?" she repeated quietly. Seo-jun nodded once, eyes lowered toward his coffee. For a long time, something emotional moved across Amara's face. "Why didn't you tell her?" He laughed softly, not happily. "She mattered too much." The answer hit harder than expected. Amara stared at him silently. And staying quiet was easier? She asked.
No.
He finally looked at her again. It was safer. The honesty in his voice almost broke her composure. Because suddenly everything became obvious. Painfully obvious. The hand warmers outside her door during winter. The late-night food deliveries. The way he remembered every detail about her life. The way he always showed up. The way he looked at her whenever she wasn't paying attention. Her heart began beating harder. Does she know? Amara asked softly. Seo-jun held her gaze for a long moment. Then quietly answered, I think part of her does. Silence filled the apartment after his confession. Heavy. Dangerous. Amara suddenly couldn't breathe normally anymore. Because if he was talking about her, his phone rang suddenly. The moment shattered instantly. Seo-jun looked down at the screen.
Yihon.
He answered quickly, almost gratefully. Hello. Ji-hoon's loud voice immediately filled the line. You've finally confessed yet, or are you still acting emotionally constipated?
Seo-jun nearly choked.
Amara's eyes widened. Seo-jun stood immediately and walked toward the hallway. Why are you yelling? He hissed quietly. Because you're wasting your life.
Yihon.
You slept at her apartment after her breakup and still said nothing? Amara covered her mouth slightly, pretending not to listen while hearing absolutely everything. Seo-jun lowered his voice further. I'll call you later. No, listen to me first. If another guy appears around her again, don't start crying and playing sad guitar music in your apartment. The call disconnected. Seo-jun stood frozen in complete embarrassment. Slowly, very slowly, he turned around. Amara was staring at him. And then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Not politely, not softly, actually laughed.
Seo-jun groaned immediately.
This is not funny. It's a little funny. Amara, you play sad guitar music?
I hate Yihon.
Her laughter filled the apartment again. Warmer this time, more alive. And despite the embarrassment burning through him, Seo-jun felt relief wash through his chest simply because she sounded happy again. That realization scared him. Because her happiness affected him too much. Far too much. Amara eventually calmed down slightly, still smiling. Your friend seems very passionate. He talks too much. He also sounds very honest.
Seo-jun sighed tiredly.
Unfortunately, a quiet moment passed again. Then Amara stepped closer slowly. Close enough now that the atmosphere shifted once more.
Seo-jun.
His heartbeat immediately betrayed him again. Yes. Her voice softened. Were you talking about me earlier? Everything inside him stopped. Completely. No escape now. No changing the subject.
No hiding.
Amara stood there patiently waiting. Emotions visible inside her eyes now instead of hidden. And for the first time in 2 years, Seo-jun realized silence might no longer save him. It might finally cost him everything. He swallowed slowly. Amara! Before he could continue, another knock suddenly echoed through the apartment. Both of them turned toward the door. Amara frowned slightly. I'm not expecting anyone. The knock came again. Seo-jun's chest tightened immediately for reasons he couldn't explain yet. Amara walked toward the entrance and opened the door slowly. A tall man stood outside holding flowers. Seo-jun's expression darkened instantly. The stranger smiled warmly at Amara. Hey, he said gently. I know this is sudden, but I wanted to check on you after hearing what happened. Amara blinked in surprise.
Tae-hyun.
The man nodded. Then his eyes shifted past her.
Toward Seo-jun.
And somehow, within 1 second, the atmosphere between the two men changed completely. Because men know, especially when another man is in love with the same woman. The silence between the two men turned sharp immediately. Not loud, not aggressive, but sharp enough that Amara felt it the second Tae-hyun stepped inside the apartment. Seo-jun stood slowly from the kitchen counter, his expression calm in the dangerous way that meant he was trying very hard not to show emotion. Tae-hyun smiled politely and extended his hand.
Kim Tae-hyun.
Seo-jun shook it once.
Kim Seo-jun.
The handshake lasted half a second too long. Amara noticed. Of course she did. She closed the door carefully behind Taehyun, while trying to understand why the atmosphere suddenly felt heavier than before. Taehyun handed her the flowers. I heard about your breakup from Min-ji, he explained gently. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Amara accepted the flowers politely. That's thoughtful. Thank you. Seo-jun looked away toward the kitchen window. Thoughtful, right? He suddenly became painfully aware that he had shown up empty-handed last night, so desperate to get to her that he hadn't even thought properly. Not flowers, not food, nothing, just himself. And somehow that realization made him feel stupid. Taehyun removed his coat casually. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. You're not, Amara answered quickly.
Seo-jun's jaw tightened slightly.
Tiny reaction, but she noticed again. Interesting. Very interesting. Taehyun glanced around the apartment before smiling lightly. You look better than I expected. I cried enough last night to flood Seoul, Amara admitted softly. That idiot doesn't deserve another tear from you. Seo-jun's expression darkened quietly at the word idiot. Not because he disagreed. Because another man was comforting her now. Another man was standing in her apartment making her smile softly, while Seo-jun stood there, like some emotionally confused ghost haunting the edges of her life. And he hated how much that thought bothered him. Amara walked toward the kitchen. Do either of you want coffee? Yes, Taehyun answered immediately. Seo-jun shook his head. I should probably leave. Amara looked at him quickly. Something about the sentence disappointed her instantly. Again, always leaving. Taehyun noticed the shift in her expression too. Interesting. Very interesting. You don't have to rush off, Taehyun said politely. Seo-jun forced a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. I have work. A Sunday morning? Yes. Amara knew it immediately. Seo-jun barely worked Sundays unless absolutely necessary. But before she could say anything, Taehyun spoke again. I actually came to invite Amara somewhere tonight. Seo-jun went still. The atmosphere changed again. Amara slowly looked toward Taehyun. Oh, there's a jazz lounge opening near Itaewon, he explained. I thought maybe getting out for a few hours would help clear your mind. Seo-jun looked down briefly. Jazz, of course. Even the detail irritated him irrationally. Amara noticed the reaction instantly, and suddenly, something inside her became certain. Seo-jun wasn't simply protective. He was jealous, deeply jealous. The realization sent warmth through her chest despite herself. Not because she enjoyed hurting him. She didn't. But because for the first time, his feelings were becoming impossible to hide completely. And she needed that, because she was tired of guessing. That sounds nice, she answered carefully. Seo-jun grabbed his coat immediately. There you go again, Amara said suddenly. Both men looked at her.
Seo-jun frowned slightly.
What? You leave every time things become uncomfortable. Taehyun glanced between them quietly. Seo-jun looked caught off guard. That's not. It is. Her voice stayed calm, but emotional. You spent the entire night here taking care of me, she continued quietly. But the second another man appears, suddenly you have work. Seo-jun's heartbeat became uneven instantly. Amara. No, say it honestly. The apartment suddenly felt too small, too warm, too emotionally crowded. Taehyun stepped back slightly, instantly realizing he had walked into something unfinished between them. Amara looked directly at Seo-jun now. What exactly are you afraid of? The question landed hard, because the answer was simple. Her. Losing her. Loving her too openly and watching everything collapse afterward. Seo-jun rubbed his hand against the back of his neck slowly. I'm not afraid. Amara laughed softly. That's the biggest lie you've ever told me. Taehyun looked between them once before quietly setting his coffee down. I think I should go. No. Seo-jun answered immediately. Yes, Amara said at the same time. The two of them looked at each other instantly. Tension. Again. Taehyun almost smiled. Interesting. Very interesting. Amara sighed softly. You don't have to leave. Taehyun shook his head gently.
No.
I think there's clearly a conversation that needs to happen here. Seo-jun looked uncomfortable immediately. Amara noticed. Of course. Taehyun grabbed his coat calmly before turning toward her. Call me later if you still want to go out tonight.
Seo-jun's chest tightened again.
Amara hesitated slightly, then nodded. Okay. Taehyun smiled softly before heading toward the door. But before leaving, he paused beside Seo-jun briefly. Just briefly. Then quietly said, if you love her, tell her before someone else does.
Seo-jun froze completely.
Amara's eyes widened instantly, and Taehyun walked out before either of them could answer. The apartment became silent again. Painfully silent. Seo-jun stared toward the closed door while emotions crashed violently inside him now. Embarrassment, fear, jealousy, panic. Because another man had just seen through him within minutes. Another man had said out loud the truth he had spent 2 years hiding. Amara slowly placed the flowers down on the table, then finally turned toward him. Well. Seo-jun closed his eyes briefly. Please don't. Don't what? Make this harder. Her expression softened slightly. Harder for who? He looked at her then. Really looked at her. And suddenly all the exhaustion from hiding finally became visible across his face. For me. The honesty in his voice stunned her quiet instantly. Seo-jun laughed weakly under his breath. You think I don't know what I'm doing? He asked quietly. You think I don't realize how ridiculous this has become? Amara's heartbeat sped up again.
Seo-jun.
I know I leave whenever things get emotional, he admitted. I know I avoid conversations. I know I keep pretending everything is normal when it's clearly not. His voice became rougher now. But I don't know how to stop. Silence. Heavy silence. Amara slowly stepped closer. Why?
Seo-jun swallowed hard.
Because loving you feels terrifying. Because you matter too much. Because if I lose you, I lose the best thing in my life. But saying those things out loud felt impossible. So instead, he whispered, because once I say it, everything changes. Amara's chest tightened painfully. Yes, she answered softly. It does. Neither of them moved. The distance between them suddenly felt unbearably small. Seo-jun could hear her breathing, could smell her shampoo faintly, could see emotion building inside her eyes now too. And it scared him because part of him finally wanted to cross the line completely. No more silence. No more hiding. Just honesty. But fear still held him tightly. Amara studied his face carefully before speaking again. You know what hurts the most?
Seo-jun looked at her quietly.
I always felt something from you. His heartbeat nearly stopped. But every time I got close to believing it, she continued softly, you pulled away again. The guilt inside him became unbearable instantly. Amara looked down briefly before laughing weakly. Do you know how confusing that feels? Seo-jun stepped closer without thinking. Amara. No, let me finish. Her voice trembled now. You look at me like I matter more than anything sometimes. You remember every detail about my life. You show up whenever I need someone. Tears slowly filled her eyes. But then you act like none of it means anything. Seo-jun's chest physically hurt now. Because she was right. Completely right. I didn't know what you wanted from me, she admitted painfully. Friendship? Distance? More? Less? I kept trying to understand your silence. Her voice broke slightly. And honestly, I got tired. That sentence shattered something inside him immediately. Tired. She got tired waiting for him. Fear suddenly became panic. Real panic. Because maybe he had already waited too long. Maybe another man eventually would take her away while he stood here still hiding behind silence like a coward. Seo-jun moved before thinking properly. Amara. She looked up instantly. His voice shook slightly now. For once, he couldn't hide anymore. And both of them knew it. I love you. The words finally left him quietly. But the moment they did, the entire room changed. Amara stopped breathing for a second. Seo-jun stared at her like he almost couldn't believe he had finally said it himself. After 2 years of silence, 2 years of fear, 2 years of loving her quietly while pretending friendship was enough. And now the truth stood between them, completely exposed. Rain tapped softly against the windows again, lighter now than the storm from the night before, but neither of them noticed. Amara's eyes filled slowly. Seo-jun immediately looked terrified by that reaction. "No, wait," he said quickly. "Don't cry. I didn't. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it like that. You idiot," she whispered emotionally. He froze. Amara laughed softly through tears before shaking her head. "You're such an idiot." Seo-jun blinked in confusion. "I've been waiting for you to say that for almost a year." His heartbeat completely lost rhythm. "What?" Amara wiped her face quickly, frustrated tears mixing with embarrassed laughter. "You think you were the only one suffering?"
Seo-jun stared at her silently.
"I noticed everything," she admitted softly. "The food outside my door, the hand warmers during winter, the way you always remembered things nobody else did." Her chest rose unevenly. "The way you looked at me whenever you thought I wasn't paying attention." Seo-jun looked away immediately, embarrassed. "That obvious?" "Yes." A small silence passed. Then Amara stepped closer. "So why didn't you say anything?" Seo-jun laughed weakly under his breath. "Because I was scared. Of me. Of losing you." That answer hit her harder than expected. Seo-jun rubbed tiredly across his face before continuing honestly for the first time. "You became too important to me." His voice stayed quiet. "And I kept thinking, if I confessed and you didn't feel the same, everything between us would disappear." Amara looked at him carefully. "So instead, you decided to emotionally torture both of us for 2 years?"
Seo-jun groaned softly.
"When you say it like that, I sound insane." "You were insane." "I know." Another silence settled between them, but this one felt different. Lighter, warmer, like both of them could finally breathe properly after holding everything inside for too long.
Seo-jun looked at her again slowly.
"There's more." Amara's heartbeat quickened. "What?" He hesitated briefly before speaking. "When you dated Hyun-woo." His jaw tightened slightly at the name. "I hated him immediately." Amara almost laughed. "You didn't even know him." "I didn't need to." "That's ridiculous." "I know." She shook her head softly while smiling through tears. "You were jealous the entire time?" "Painfully." "How painfully?"
Seo-jun sighed dramatically.
"Do you really want honesty right now?" "Yes. I almost blocked him on your Instagram once." Amara stared at him in disbelief. "You what?" "I said almost. You're unbelievable." He kept commenting heart emojis. She burst into laughter suddenly. Real laughter, the kind she hadn't felt in weeks. Seo-jun watched her carefully, and once again, the sight hit him directly in the chest. He loved her laugh, loved the way her entire face changed when she genuinely smiled, loved the way happiness softened her eyes. And now, for the first time, he could admit it openly. Amara slowly calmed down before looking at him again more seriously. "You know something?" "What?" "You hurt me sometimes." The confession immediately wiped the smile from his face. "I know."
"No."
"I mean really hurt me."
Seo-jun's chest tightened painfully again.
"Every time you pulled away emotionally," she continued quietly, "every time things became real and you suddenly acted distant, I kept wondering what I did wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong. I know that now." He looked down slowly. "But before today, I didn't." That truth crushed him, because protecting himself had accidentally hurt her instead. And that was never what he wanted. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Amara stepped closer again. "No more apologies." Seo-jun looked up. "I don't want quiet feelings anymore," she said softly. "If we do this, we do it honestly." The word alone nearly destroyed him emotionally. "You really mean that?" he asked carefully. Amara smiled faintly. "You think I would stand here crying over you if I didn't?" Seo-jun laughed softly then. A real laugh this time. Small. Relieved. Disbelieving. And before he could overthink himself back into fear again, Amara gently grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him closer. Then she kissed him, softly at first, carefully, like both of them were still adjusting to the reality that this was finally happening. Seo-jun froze for half a second before kissing her back immediately. Every emotion he had buried for 2 years seemed to break open at once. Relief, love, wanting, fear disappearing. The feeling was overwhelming. When they finally pulled apart, neither of them spoke immediately. Seo-jun rested his forehead lightly against hers, breathing unevenly. "I really almost ruined this by staying quiet forever," he admitted weakly. Amara smiled. "Very almost." He closed his eyes briefly. "I'm serious. Another few months and I probably would have watched you marry somebody while silently suffering in a corner." "That's dramatic." "It's accurate." She laughed again quietly. Then her expression softened. "You know what finally convinced me?" Seo-jun opened his eyes. "What?" "You came here during the storm." His chest tightened instantly. Amara looked at him carefully. "You didn't text first. You didn't hesitate. You just came."
Seo-jun swallowed slowly.
"I couldn't let you be alone. That's when I knew." "Knew what?" "That nobody would ever love me more honestly than you do." The emotion in her voice almost broke him again. For years, Seo-jun had convinced himself silence was safer. But standing here now, holding her finally, he realized something important. Love was never meant to survive inside silence forever. It needed to be spoken, seen, felt openly. Otherwise, people slowly start believing they were never loved at all. Before we continue, if this emotional Afro Korea story is touching your heart already, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and comment below. Have you ever loved someone who was too afraid to confess their feelings? We read every single comment. Later that evening, Seoul glowed softly beneath fresh rainwater. The city looked cleaner after storms, quieter somehow. Amara stood beside her apartment window holding a cup of tea while Seo-jun cooked in the kitchen behind her. The normalness of it felt strange, beautiful, dangerous. She turned slightly. "You know this still feels unreal, right?" Seo-jun looked over his shoulder. "What does?" "You. This." He smiled faintly. "I know." Amara watched him carefully for a second before speaking again. "You really loved me all this time?"
Seo-jun laughed softly.
"That question sounds insulting now." "I'm serious." "So am I." His voice softened naturally. "There was never anybody else for me." Her chest tightened warmly. And suddenly she understood why his silence had always felt so heavy. Because it was carrying real love the entire time. And now finally, neither of them had to hide anymore. If you enjoyed this emotional Afro Korea story filled with secret love, jealousy, heartbreak, and unforgettable confession moments, make sure you subscribe right now, like this video, and share it with someone who needs the courage to finally speak their feelings before it's too late. And comment below, if you were Amara, would you have kept waiting for Seo-jun to confess? Or would you have moved on completely? Afro Korea Untold, where emotions speak louder than silence.